Hello and welcome back to One-on-One Shadowboxing. Today with Paul Whitfield. And the topic for the day is refugees and the Christian view on refugees. Paul, we discussed the root of the problem of having 45 million refugees currently around the world. And we came to the conclusion, obviously, Australia could not accommodate 45 million refugees just one day to the other. So it's not necessarily our task to solve this problem. However, I think we probably need to ask one very common sense based question. Do we have the right to refuse the refugees, or we need to take it in? Apart from signing international agreements, what the humanity telling us inside? When someone is in pain or in problem, probably we should help, because we think that's what we learned from Christ.
Every Australian seeing boat people drowning off Christmas Island have the same emotional reaction. Whatever label, whatever nationality, whatever religion, whatever country these people come from, they're people that are in need. And I think there's something inside all of us that calls out to help these people. And one approach to it is the political one, governments choosing to protect their own, governments opting in to welcoming refugees. The other is what we know intrinsically, what we know inside ourselves, that each individual is valued by us. The Christian perspective, each individual is valued by their Maker, by God, and that our gut instinct of, if I can help, I should, is right.
So we should, offer our hand and help on the ones who got the need for it. I think that was the basis for the UN when they set up the convention to the right of the people to seek refuge and the duties of the countries to take them in as much as they prefer or can. I don't know that when that very honorable law been made, I don't think the law said if you help someone and give refuge in your home or in your country, you have to do this ultimately forever. I think the way to seek refuge is, I got a problem at home, it's war or whatever is that, I have to run away because I fear for my life. Then I as a neighbor say, come to my house, it's protect you and your family. You got a bit of food and you're working with us, you earn, you eat, you sleep, you're well. So I'm offering you this refuge. But I think when your country is get over the problem, which we may can help to get over the problem, and when the country is happy, as should be, then you going back, because I think your roots are there. And when the country is stable, you should go back to build your country, build your nation, and practice your culture and religion.
We've got a lot to learn from our history, even just the past history of 60 years since World War II. And I think Australia has been heroes in this story. We've been good Samaritans in the way that we've responded to international needs in the past. So if you take immediately after the Second World War, 164,000 people came from Eastern Europe, often fleeing from new regimes in Eastern Europe, often Jews who immediately after the Second World War were concerned for their safety. We welcomed in people by the boatload, literally. Worked with the UN to accept people who wanted to come to Australia. And it's a story of triumph, I say. It's a story of Australia prospering by showing mercy. One of my good friends from school, his dad was from Hungary and came to Australia after the war. He wasn't an economic migrant, but he had to leave his home because his family was very entrepreneurial, ran a number of businesses, and were a great resource to Hungary. They came to Australia. Surprise, surprise, what does he do? He starts up small businesses. He employs hundreds of people. And that's the story of the past, whatever wrong might have been done in the past 200 years. The story of the past 200 years of migration to Australia has been people coming
and benefiting the country.
And benefiting the country, that's right. Benefiting themselves, yes, but benefiting the country. My dad came here as a POM. He might have whinged for a while, but he has brought millions, possibly tens of millions of dollars worth of research grants to Australia. Thankfully, that money didn't go to England, it came to Australia. And you think about, in that first generation even, people who've come as political refugees have done amazing things in our economy. There's lots of economic arguments that I could give.
Yeah.
Jesus says, show mercy, trust me in the rest. And Australia, if we show mercy, will be blessed by waves of immigrants who will come to our shores. If they want to stay here short term, that's wonderful. Hopefully the situation, maybe with our help, maybe without, will be resolved overseas. My friend went back to Hungary. He had kids here. They grew up. They went through our schools. They drive Fords and Holdens. They don't speak their dad's first language. He went back and found that there was no way he could, even when the political situation had changed, there was no way he could claim back his businesses. He couldn't resettle. His kids didn't want to go. They wanted to stay here. He decided, Australia, okay, that's where my family, intergeneration, will live. And those friends now live in Western Australia, and they're very smart people, and they benefit the economy down in Bustleton when they work. But I think you're right that whether we could show mercy by offering temporary protection visas until the situation is resolved at home, or we could show a different type of mercy, saying you're welcome to stay here for as long as you like. And I think the story, if you just look back at the past 60 years, the story of Australia is that that has blessed us and enriched us as a society, not just in the food that we eat, but on every level.
Which is very important sometimes.
It is, it's very important. I love the food that immigrants have brought to Australia. It would be a very bland place if all I was eating was meat and 3 veg. I love it, but it works at more than just that level. Every level of our relationships, we're blessed by the people who come to our shores.
So what can you say, Paul, from the Christian point of view? What is the solution then? Because we know we couldn't solve all the problems, but what do you think, how can you see the future?
I think
as a solution?
We should imagine a better future, and a way we can do that is we can look back to the past. Australia has been a country of compassion in the past and has benefited hugely. If we look overseas, we can see the benefits of compassion as well. Refugees is not a new problem. There's a guy who was in France, who was a Protestant pastor in occupied France, occupied by the Germans. He taught his congregation to welcome in these refugees. The Vichy regime, the Nazi regime in France, told him, you must produce a list of Jews that you know of in your community. He says, I don't know what Jews are, I just know people. And I think you're right that whatever label we put on migrants to Australia, whether they're economic migrants who we bring in because we've got skills shortages, or whether they're refugees who are seeking refuge in our country, they're people, first of all. And Jesus wants us to show compassion, treat them the way that we would want to be treated.
So if this is the Christian view, why both big political parties these days seems to agree on stopping the boat?
Whether it's Tony Abbott or Kevin Rudd or the National Liberal or the Labor Party,
yes,
I think Christians need to live up to their Christ, their King. And that's been the problem over 2,000 years, that I and Christians fall well short of the mark that Jesus set. I think Tony Abbott can look to the most loving man in history, as he described, who gave his life for the sake of aliens, for the sake of strangers and foreigners. Tony Abbott he's not Jewish, he's a foreigner, and Jesus died for him so that he, as a foreigner, could be accepted into God's kingdom. And that is a perfect model for Christians living in Australia. We've been welcomed. Let's welcome others in need to the resources that we have.
Now, Paul, just to finish up this topic, I don't think we can find a perfect solution ourselves. I don't think the world will find. But just would like to throw the intention of yours into Europe and the experience of Europe with refugees, not with migrants necessarily. What can we learn from Europe who also try to be merciful and try to give the refuge for the people, and they are ending up with huge social problems as a consequence of the good deed of Christianity? So what can we learn from this?
Europe puts our situation in Australia in perspective, doesn't it? 45 million refugees around the world, many of them crowding into highly populated countries. We're talking about 17,000. We bring in 200,000 migrants every year. We're talking about 10% of that being assigned to boat people. It puts it in perspective. Over the years, over the past 50 years, Australia has brought in about 1% of its population by migration, 200,000 compared with 20 million. And our policy of multiculturalism, which is really cultural assimilation, has worked very smoothly. I think if 45 million people were to arrive on our doorstep tomorrow, that would mean political upheaval, that would mean significant social change. But I think if Australia doubled to 2%, every year we'll grow our population by 2% by allowing 400,000 refugees in, we would expect exactly the same thing to happen over the next 50 years as what has happened over the past 50 years. We wouldn't expect the same thing to happen that's happening in Germany or in France or in other parts of Europe. We'd expect that our culture would be enriched, but people by the second generation would be speaking English, holding our values, contributing to our economy and choosing not to go home.
But Paul, how can we do that? It's nice on theory, okay? I'm not saying no to it, but if you look at the situation of the economy, where are the resources for that?
I'd make one immediate suggestion. Instead of spending $200,000 a year per asylum seeker, processing them offshore, which is what we do for people who come by boat, let's spend $10,000 a year processing people onshore, which is what we do for people who've come by plane.
Yes.
That would save us over $3 billion this year. We could invest that $3 billion in reducing the deficit over a few years. We could be back into surplus. If we just changed that one hard-line policy, we would have the money to pay off our deficit.
So
perhaps we could invest that $3 billion in integrating people with good services into Australia. It is a costly thing to do to bring migrants, whether they're refugees or other types of migrants to Australia, but it pays off and we have to do it. Our population is getting older. We need to keep on raising up a new generation, and migration is a brilliant way to do it.
Thanks, Paul, being the guest today.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your comments. And please come back next week, same channel, same time. One-on-one shadow boxing.